Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Really nice to see lots of familiar faces and also some I don't know. Also, random fun fact, but my friend's mom was in that video, Arlene Anderson, and that made me feel great. Okay, I am very, very excited to introduce this guest. Even just in chatting with her off on the side, so many people have come up to us and sort of fanboyed, fangirled. It's very exciting, and I think she has a lot to offer us just in terms of where we are at now as students. Or faculty. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to feel extremely tired and stressed and overwhelmed, and it's the end of the semester, and sort of how to stay confident and keep our eyes on the prize, as they would say, and like take care of ourselves, I think is really important, and I think Komal can teach us a lot about that. So just a little bit about our speaker. Komal is the founder of Karseva, a company focused on building individual and societal resilience through training programs, media production, and investing. She curates powerful experiences and conversations as an interviewer, business strategist, educator, investor, and champion for women globally. She does a lot of things. She wears a lot of hats. And for her work was named Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul 100 list. She's also interviewed Michelle Obama and Sophie Trudeau. We are extremely lucky to have her with us here today, and I know she'll leave us lots to think about and reflect upon. So, without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Komal.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pumped to be here. I'm going to be this person who's like, hey, come join us at the front. There's an empty row up here. So if anyone from the back wants to like scooch up, you're welcome to. But I also understand like peer pressure in doing that. So
come get cozy.
Folks over there, whoever'd like to come, or we'll just keep
Julie
it
will get cozy with us.
Love that for us. Hey. Amazing. I'm so pumped to be here with everybody as everyone gets settled. Yes. I like when it feels like a living room because we're going to dive into some like important topics for all of us, especially at this point in the semester. So we're all going to lay down all that armor and all the things that might be bothering us right now and just dive right in.
Awesome. For anyone in the audience here who might not know your story or know too much about you, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about what brought you here today, why you do what you do, and just your journey as a business person and as an inspiring human.
So my dad immigrated to Canada in 1974 to Grand Prairie, Alberta. So I am a born and raised Albertan. It's a lot colder than here, even though today feels so cold. It's like minus 20 there right now, so we're happy. And I was born into an immigrant household. And I know that Algonquin is such a great school for folks who are new to Canada, international students. And so when I see that here, it encourages me because my dad and my mom were similar in that way. And the life that they were able to build for me, give me, offer me was one that has been exceptional. And they really prioritized education for me as a way forward. And I also got to be the communicator for our family. It's funny, my mom this morning called me, we were catching up, and I told her I was coming to do this talk, and then at the end of our conversation, she's like, Komal, what's the word for X experience? Can you remind me? And that's like me being the translator for my family my whole life. And so I gave her the right adjective, and she went off and posted her Facebook post, and I came here to see all of you today. So I had to learn how to communicate and be that bridge between worlds at a young age. And so when I was looking at what I wanted to do for school, I excelled in physics, but then I also excelled in English and storytelling. And so I was that immigrant child who said to my parents, I will not do engineering, I will do journalism. Fortunately, they were very supportive, and I came here and studied at Carleton. And when I was in J school, I realized quickly that journalism was changing. And I grew up in a household where business was very prominent. It was something that I experienced every day. And so I thought, I'm going to get into the business of storytelling versus traditional journalism. And that's when I started my first company, which was a film and video production company where I would work for small startups and nonprofits in Ottawa, tell their stories. And then I got into documentary filmmaking. And that's when I moved to New York City to work on a film called Dream Girl, a documentary about ambitious women entrepreneurs that we premiered at the Obama White House. And I know I'm telling you like the Coles notes of this all, so I know we'll get into the details so you can get some understanding of how these things sort of came to life. But simultaneously with bringing Dream Girl to the world, which was a very exciting period of my life, I was also diagnosed with a rare form of skin cancer. So at 26, my life was upended. I was living my dream in New York, but then also having to travel home to Ottawa for free healthcare. And the intensity of all of that took me out. And I needed to take a year off to sort of recover from the intensity of that period of time, just in time for a global pandemic. So I was in a bit of an isolation before we all collectively were in an isolation. And in between there, had pitched my way to interview Michelle Obama at the Canadian Tire Center here in Ottawa, which was a life-changing moment for me. But what I learned through that entire journey, through starting my business, through pivoting and meandering through my career and continuing to swing big, is that our resiliency is our through line. It's the thing that is a muscle that we can build, is something that we can build with our community, with our family, and lean on in the hard times. And I know this point in the semester in particular can be exceptionally difficult for students. So I want this conversation to be an opportunity for you to remember that resiliency that you have and the supports that you have around you, and lean on those. So that's my story in a nutshell. There's a lot of pieces there. And I'm excited to see where we go next.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I think you've touched into something that I know I've thought a lot about, and I'm sure other people as well, but what happens when we are quite ambitious and chasing our dreams and thinking things are working out for us, but a setback we weren't expecting sort of comes in our way, and how do we cope with that and not be hard on ourselves that our plans might be uprooted. So I'm curious just to ask you a little bit more about that resiliency component that you were talking about. Were there, either when you were in New York or when you needed to move back to Ottawa, were there particular moments or strategies that helped you build that resilience so that you were able to come out on top of all this?
So what the pandemic enabled me to do was sort of look back on my lived experience of multiple, growing up in a traumatic household, going through this experience with cancer diagnosis, recovery, and saying, like, what was the through line? What were the multiple things that, were the factors that helped me work through it all? And I kind of came up with this framework called the roots of resilience. It's 6 key ways that we can flex our resiliency. Because a lot of the time we're like, oh, that person's resilient. I can't possibly be resilient. But then when we look under the hood, we're like, oh, wait, no, I've got this. I can do this thing. I moved halfway across the world, or I moved halfway across the country, or I'm supporting my family as a sole breadwinner, or I'm the first in my family to go to school in this way. We often forget our own resilience, and we get so locked into how great everybody else is. So those 6 roots of resilience I then validated by looking into the positive psychology research and built a curriculum around them, and taught that curriculum for this past 3 years because we all needed to be really resilient the last 2 years. And in fact, we're all probably burnt out from having to be so resilient. So some of the key ways are community. So in positive psychology research, the key indicator across the board of well-being is the quality of your community. So when was the last time you called someone you loved and just had a good time chatting with them? That's your homework after today is who am I gonna call to reconnect with? My mom was the one who called me this morning. I'm gonna call my grandma on the way home because I haven't chatted with her in a minute. But reconnecting to the people who know us well, who have been there to support us, who have seen us through hard times is a key way to stay resilient. Another is to prioritize your well-being. So something I shared on Instagram yesterday was that the last sort of year of my life, I had a mental health sort of crisis about 18 months ago. And this is my reminder to you that even as you get out of college, as you become what you're meant to be in your career, your mental health is an ongoing thing to pay attention to be present with. And coming out of that crisis, I realized I didn't want to meditate. I didn't want to go inward. I was actually kind of not interested in listening to what was going on in my head for a while. So I focused on work and I focused on friendships and community. And that was the bridge that I needed to feel strong enough to now start habits that serve me. So if you're hearing all this self-care stuff that's meditate, relax, take some time, but it doesn't feel good in your body, don't do it. You get to pay attention to what actually works for you. And that's also part of resiliency is not being rigid with our routines and being a little bit more flexible and letting ourselves sort of figure out what's best for us and not have to like listen to the noise around us of what's best for us. The other thing is something called self-efficacy, which is our belief in ourselves that we can do hard things. So do you ever wonder why you love like the movie Rudy or like Hero's Journey movies or like Legally Blonde, where you're like, I am Elle Woods, I'm going to law school? It's because of something called vicarious experiences. When we hear about someone's journey, it enables us to think we can do something similar, that we can overcome the hard thing. When you listen to podcasts, are you sometimes like, wow, why do I feel so pumped? Like, why do I keep coming back to this person's story? Why do I keep watching this movie? This is how we can make our Netflixing and chilling a little bit more productive. Pick stories that inspire you, that are reflective of something that you're going through right now. My husband loves UFC, and so Israel Adesanya just had his big fight, and we watched it on Saturday night, and his story of resiliency is one that Mitch shares with me often. And so whatever your form of storytelling or form of media consumption is, see it in a way of like, how can this uplift me right now when you're going through something tough? So those are 3 ways that you can build resilience. There's many more that I can obviously talk about at length, but those are 3 key ones that I think might be helpful for this particular moment.
Very, very inspiring, very amazing. I love the movie thing. That makes me be like, okay, that's why I watch Juno 800 times.
Yes.
Just because like, what
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
They come out the end.
Identity, coming to terms with oneself. Also, some of the things that you were talking about makes. I heard this from someone about the difference between inhaling and exhaling in our lives, and just like when we're putting a lot out there, whether it's as students or in our jobs or in helping others, there's only so much exhale you can do before you sort of inhale, and just like, but that can look different for everybody, and it doesn't necessarily have to be meditation or like traditional forms of self-care.
To that, I'll actually say something that I encourage clients that I work with to do is to look at their life like they're athletes. So athletes have their preseason, their in-season, their postseason. And so we have to think about that. Like as students, your semester is your in-season. This is when you're going hard. This is when you're like going all out. But when Christmas break comes or holidays come, that can be your off-season. For a lot of folks, you still have to be working during that time. But how do you really allow yourself to replenish? And then in your preseason, those first few days before the semester starts, how do you really get yourself prepared for the semester ahead? So if you think of your life in this flow instead of like a constant pedal to the like full throttle, I used to be full throttle, and I would go home and burn out every time I went home for the summer, and my family was like, how are you such a productive person when you're such a piece of this when you come home? And like, I swear, I do things, just not when I'm here. But when I started looking at it like these sprints and these, ebbs and flows, it really helped me be more sustainable in my career and well-being. And I think in the world today, we're constantly connected. You have to plug your phone in a different room so that you actually let yourself sleep because we're not machines. But we have to remember to turn off and find our ways to like let our bodies actually rest. Because if athletes went full throttle all the time, they wouldn't be elite. And that's how we become elite in our own ways, is taking the time to rest. Rest is productive.
Do you think that it's possible to reach your full potential if you don't take care of your well-being?
Yes. I think like potential defined as like the vertical of success. You can be really successful and not rest, not have a great family in conventional ways of success. But when you go about redefining success for yourself and saying like, what does that actually mean? Is it like fulfilled life, happiness, connection to family, positive well-being, all these things? Then probably not. But the way that we're fed success, there's this person online named Gary Vaynerchuk who like goes all out, but also values his family, all the things. But like sometimes I think people just derive from his content the hustle, and you really need to be more mindful and holistic in that approach. But we all need to take time to redefine success for ourselves and say, what does that look like for me? And then really live that. But if you're going conventional success, like let me tell you, like I did the lists, I made the money, I did the things, and I was empty inside, and I got really sick. And then I had to realize, like, what actually does my life? Like, what's the value of it? So choose your own adventure, but I really hope you'll, like, borrow some of this vicarious experience and be like, hey, I'm actually going to rest over the holidays a little bit.
Vicarious experience and off period is what I'm taking away from
Yes.
this so far. Those are my standouts. Can you talk a little bit more about what redefining success looked like for you?
100%. So I grew up every day coming home at 4 p.m. and Oprah was on the TV. And I was like, I'm going to be Oprah. I love interviewing people. I love talking to people. I'm going to have my show. This is what success is going to look like for me. The thing is, there's like a once-in-a-generation type of person that becomes my benchmark for success that's never achievable, like 0%, because history, like there's certain individuals in history that change the way that we can like take content in, our historical figures, and she's one of them. So I'm not gonna be that. And giving myself permission to decouple from my expectations of what success was really allowed me to then be like, okay, what does this look like? I actually really enjoy downtime with my husband and like having a bit more of a quiet life in the countryside sometimes. I lived in New York City and I hated it. I was like, there's 9 million people in like a 2-mile radius. Like, that's way too many humans. I grew up in Grand Prairie, Alberta. So I go back once a quarter instead, and that like serves me so much better. The smells in Toronto, don't love it. Downtown smells not great all the time. I love fresh air, really value that as an Albertan. And so I live this hybrid life that I didn't think I had permission to. I am a night owl. Even as a successful, functioning human, my peak is like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. I start my days at 9. Like, I'm not a 5 a.m. crew. And giving myself permission for the way that I structure my days to not look the way that it does for others. And mind you, I'm an entrepreneur. There's a lot of privilege that I hold. This isn't, possible for everyone. But redefining success came back to the habits, the structures of my day, and then also my goals for my career. So you can look at it in different levels and just take some time to journal and reflect on that, because that's going to give you the ability to, even as you're studying, be like, who am I doing this degree for? Like, am I doing it for my parents? Am I doing it for myself? Am I doing it for society? And in that restructuring, you get the opportunity to find more energy as well. Because if you're more aligned in your purpose in that way with like, I'm actually doing this for myself and my own dreams and my own goals, and I still do it for my family because of all of the things that they've invested in me, sacrificed for me, that motivates you in a different way. It takes some of the dullness out of your life. So I would say start with habits, how your days are structured, and then look at those bigger goals and get intentional around that in redefining success.
Amazing. You're a very good speaker, but everybody already knew this. That's why they hired you. A little bit of a segue off of that, but then just relating to all of us. Some of us are nearing graduation soon. What is your biggest set of advice for those of us who are headed out into the real world, into whatever that means?
Okay, so this is, okay, whatever.
Do it.
There's a Blink-182 song where the lyric is, "No one likes you when you're 23." That is like fact. Like and some of y'all are older, have come back to school, like I get it. This is not applicable to you. But you have been in school for majority of your life, going from like 9th grade to 12th, like going up the ladder, going from first year to second, whatever your degree program is, climbing this ladder. When you get out of here, the structure is gone. You build your structure, you build your benchmarks, you build your timeline. And the first few years of that is messy, because you might get the job, you might get the position that you were looking for and realize like, I'm underemployed and I'm really unhappy and I finish my work in one day of my week and now I just sit here. And you're like, okay, and that was me. That was my first job out of university. I would go to this beautiful building in Toronto, work 8 hours, be done my work for that week, and then look at my manager and they wouldn't know what to do with me. And I just was like, is this what I spent my entire career working towards? I was like, this is, we're using the word gaslighting very fluidly these days, but like, have I been gaslit my whole educational career that like, this is the goal? So it's gonna get messy. But you can create clarity by being reflective, by using that angst and refocusing on, okay, so what does purpose through my career look like? But then also for a lot of us, if you're just looking for that 9 to 5 and then living your life outside of the 9 to 5, we need to give people permission for that to be how we live our lives, because fulfillment doesn't come from work as much as like that's what we're fed these days. And capitalism does that to us. But if you are wanting to find more fulfillment from your work, just like getting ahead of designing what that can look like for you. But yeah, no one liked me when I was 23. My cousins and my sibling can tell you that, and my parents. I liked me when I was 23, but that's neither here nor there.
Is anyone 23 right now?
Hey!
Hola.
I like you.
I like you. You've had a very full career in a short period of time. Where do you see things going in the future? Are you kind of just rolling with it, or do you have a clear goal as to where you want to take your business?
I am very excited to be open to possibilities. So when I was sick in my 20s, I was kind of out of commission with my career from 27 to like halfway through 28. And I have a chip on my shoulder about that because those are like key career building years. Like I had a lot of momentum happening in my life, and then like my brain stopped working after my cancer recovery. I had a neurological illness, and it took me about 1.5 years to recover. And when I look back at that time, pre-pandemic, like, yes, I have this regret where I'm like, oh, so much could have happened. But then all of this knowledge that I can share with you today, like, wouldn't have been the way that it is right now. So when I think of my career now, I think of it as like, there's always more to be done, and there's always more that we can do and evolve our dreams and goals into. So something I know for sure for myself is I really want to explore the opportunity of entering politics in the next like 5 to 10 years. And before that, asking myself, how can I help support through my business increasing voter turnout in Canada? Because in the last provincial election, there's a lot of discontent of folks who are feeling this way around our healthcare system, privatization, conversations around that, education, QP going on strike. But a lot of it came down to the lowest voter turnout in Ontario history. And how do we protect democracy? We vote. How do we prevent things like what happened in the States with the insurrection? We vote. And regardless of what your political stripes are, I just want people engaged in our democracy. Because as Canadians, we are so privileged, and that privilege can lead to complacency. So something that I'm deeply passionate about exploring in my career is increasing voter turnout, being a part of that across Canada, and then exploring what running for politics could look like for me one day. In advance of that, continuing to support folks to feel your own potential, to like see what's possible in your life and career, regardless of your identity. Because the more actualized we have human beings, I think as a society, the better off we are. So the more we can support one another and being like, hey, you're awesome. You should go after that thing, regardless of what it is. Like, my husband loves watching dudes fight each other. But those dudes are very accomplished MMA fighters. Like, it's an art. I don't need to see that much blood, but I support his like passion of watching this thing. But it doesn't matter what the goal is, as long as you find your path towards doing it to the best of your abilities and feeling fulfilled in doing it. I think that societally is going to make us a lot more strong and better suited to, protecting our democracy, to feeling connected as people, to not feeling so divisive. So those are things that light me up for this next chapter of work.
Amazing. I just have one more question, and then that came from this answer. Then I'm going to pass it over to our audience to see what they have. But what you were just saying there, what really landed with me is just that period where you felt like you were supposed to be in a momentous part of your life and you had to slow down. I feel like that's quite relatable just because of the pandemic. I think a lot of us, whether we were in high school or we were getting going in previous careers, there was a bit of a slowdown or even a stop. How did you kind of crawl out of that and figure out how to make the most of what you were doing in the pandemic and now kind of coming out of the pandemic, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So when the pandemic hit, March 2020, we all remember exactly what we were doing. I was planning an 8-city North American tour for my podcast, and we were 2 weeks out from doing our first event in Toronto with Julie Black. And at this beautiful theater, we had the OAG booked out here for a show here, and then obviously we know the story. And And so the pivot, right? And the pivot out of necessity was the first pivot of the pandemic, where we were all like, okay, how do I keep working? How do I keep my family healthy? How do I continue and finish high school? How do I continue the momentum in my career? Zoom became our best friend. Our eyeballs hated us. But then the reality of it started sinking in, and the depression and the anxiety, and for a lot of people, the various mental health issues, the things we can control, and becoming sort of obsessive about those things possibly. And as we're coming out of that, there's no collective reckoning. There hasn't been like a national moment or day for us to sort of reconcile with what we all just went through. No one's talking about it, we've all just continued. So we're like, wait a second, I lost this huge part of myself, huge part of my hopes and my dreams, and now you just want me to pretend like it never happened? You want me to just go to class? You want me to just feel passionate about what I'm doing? You want me to like just gloss over the fact that I had the worst mental health I've ever had? And that's what people are asking us to do. And so part of being radical in this moment is saying, what if I choose differently? For me, it's looked like a lot of journaling and reflecting, having real conversations with my husband, with my family, and grieving the life that I was going to have, and then reckoning with the life I actually have, and saying, okay, no one's gonna motivate me to be that version of me again. I can never be that version of me again, but I can do something great still. And so I want y'all to hear that we can collectively, with your pockets of people, process what we went through, and then claim the dreams that you can still have now, and do it on your terms, and find the momentum that you need and the motivation you need to go after them. Because right now, those of us who can find that light through, like we saw people talk about this, so many great businesses are built during recessionary times, during crisis, innovation. This is such a great time to be innovative. If you can take care of yourself and find your thread of innovation, your thread of passion and purpose, like you can come out swinging from this. If you want to be swinging. If you just want to 10% thrive, that's excellent too. So, but the baseline of what we need to find a way to do is reckon with what changed in our lives and then make sense of the next steps that matter to us. I want to come out swinging. So that's what my goal is right now, is how do I swing and swing bigger than what I could have done then? And also find time, keep the time I've been sleeping, because I still like my 8 hours of sleep. So there's a way to do both. But yeah, so that's I would say, like, we haven't collectively reckoned. We need to take that time, and then we can make sense of like, okay, who can I be now?
I want to come out swinging and
Yes!
still be a night owl.
Yes! All of it's possible!
It's all possible. Okay, thank you for answering all of my questions so fully and generously. I'm gonna pass it over because I'm sure some of you guys have some questions. Lauren, who's just over there, is going to be the mic runner. So just once, if you raise your hand and you have a question, just wait until the mic comes to you. I believe we have our first person.
Hi. It might be off. It's like Zoom. Is my mic on? Is my camera on?
I can be the mic runner if that's okay. Is it better now? No. It's okay.
And we can share ours up here. Perfect.
Thank you. So my name is Miriam, and
Hi, Miriam.
Hi. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about Dream Girls and just kind of what the project was about, how you got started with that, and everything like that.
Absolutely. So Dream Girl, Miriam asked if I could talk a little bit more about Dream Girl, which is the documentary film that I produced and supported, that we premiered at the Obama White House, that got me on Oprah's Super Soul 100 list. So who all knows about like the girl boss era and how it's like dead now, and like the whole problematic blow up? So there was a period of time where there was like very low women entrepreneurship and stories of women entrepreneurs at the forefront. And that period of time was like 2014 and prior. So in 2014, I came across this Kickstarter campaign, which is a crowdfunding platform that was trying to raise funds for a documentary about telling the stories of women founders. I had started my production company, like I shared, had all of this camera equipment that I was lugging around in this backpack that was like 100 pounds, and that if Air Canada weighed, they wouldn't let me take it on as a carry-on, but I still took it as a carry-on. And so for the person who was leading this Kickstarter campaign, Erin Bagwell, I reached out to her and said, I've got all this camera equipment, I want to support you. At the time, they had just surpassed raising $100,000 for the film. It had sort of gone viral. And she responded and was like, come down, we're gonna be on set in production in November, we'd love to have you. And so over that period of time, she and I started developing a relationship that ended up turning into us both producing the film and Erin directing the film. So I took on the distribution and the business side of the documentary, and she took on the creative and production, and so ensued a wild 2 years of my life. Of driving back and forth to New York, because when you're a recently graduated student, you don't have a lot of money to be flying back and forth, so those were like some fun road trips. Also, there's a lot of free parking in Manhattan. No one thinks that there is, but there's great street parking. And she and I started building this movement together. And that's how a lot of y'all in the room may be familiar with my work. And so when that film was coming to life, I got dropped right into documentary production, got to see what a full set looks like, a full all-woman crew, which was also novel at the time. And we got to profile these stories of 5 different women founders and their founder journeys, which was novel at the time. And it was really remarkable for me as a woman founder and storyteller to be immersed in that space, to understand interviewing, because now at my background in journalism, I am an interviewer, I have my podcast. It's an art form. What you've done, you beautifully today. Thank you for being such a great interviewer with me today. But I learned by doing. And that is like one of the biggest lessons from Dream Girl, is like learn through action. There's so much we learn in the classroom, but no one taught me in 4th year journalism, or 3rd year when we got cameras and started doing like video hits and whatever, and used like very archaic programming in video editing. No one really was like, go forth, take this. But then I started doing mini docs on the side. I started renting camera equipment from the J School so that I could learn and hone my editing skills. I realized that I loved Final Cut better, and then Premiere Pro better. I taught myself how to use Adobe Suite. And I started learning how to do the technical skills of the thing that I loved. YouTube was great. There was no, I did a little bit of this in J School, but they only teach you so much around video production. And nowadays, video, these devices that we have, the TikTok generation, you are a filmmaker. And so that's what Dream Girl taught me the most, was to learn through action and to get really good at pitching. So I was very keen on getting a woman founder from Calgary named Suzanne West into the film. She had started in a company called Imaginea Energy. She raised $200 million for this. She wasn't well profiled across Canada. And so I thought, I'm gonna get Suzanne West in this movie. And so I added her work phone number, which was publicly listed, into my cell phone. And when we were producing and on set in New York, we were end of production one day, and I was in a cab, and I was like, I'm gonna call and see what happens. And she answered. And in 2 minutes, I pitched her. She says, I'm in the middle of something, let me call you right back. I sent her the link to the Kickstarter trailer. She watched it, she called me back. She's like, I'm in. She's like, I'm in New York next week, and I shit you not, her gap in her schedule was the same in our filming schedule. So she came to set, and that's how Suzanne West became part of the film. But what's even more beautiful is that she passed away from a brain tumor 3 years ago. And so we were able to, through that film, for a moment of time, protect Suzanne's legacy. And it was because of the courage to ask, the courage to save that phone number, to make the call, to make the pitch, to do the ask. And even with my Michelle Obama interview, I ended up being able to go to a meet and greet on her book tour in Colorado, and pitched her cold in 30 seconds to interview her as one of the moderators of her Canadian tour. And in that 30-second pitch, from hearing 30-second, we'd never met before, she said, this is destiny, and she introduced me to her chief of staff. And then it didn't work out, but then it eventually did work out. So don't be afraid to ask. have the courage to ask. My parents taught me this as immigrants to Canada. They only got where they are today through having courage, through taking a risk, through having a dream, through being okay with failing to get there, but still swinging. So those would be two big lessons from the Dream Girl experience.
Hi, Komal. Thanks for being here.
What's your name?
Adil. I'm Adil.
Hi, Adil.
You spoke earlier in your talk about burnout and how this is something that most of us, at least students, are going through. And I loved your analogy of the sports analogy of it being in season and pre and post season. But I'm a little curious because, and I'd love if you could, explain a little more on this. But for most of us, while it is like in season now for academics, it's pre-season for work. And then like when we're off for 2 months, that's in season for work. And for us, like for the body still treats it as 10 hours of not being home and not relaxing, right? So we don't really get an off season at all. It's just like off season from academics, but it's not an off season. So do you have any suggestions on how we do manage to take time off to recharge?
Thank you for being for sharing your experience with me. And I think it's looking at it as a micro of a daily. So instead of thinking of the macro seasons, because obviously there's no off season, it's what are the pockets in my days where recharge can happen. And also zooming out and saying this period of time, because when you're sharing that, I think of like my dad, and my parents, and their unrelenting work ethic. Like you are that for your next generation. You are the parent or the person that they're going to be reflecting on how hard you worked for making this happen for you and for them. And when we zoom out, it also gives us perspective to say, is this going to be 2 or 3 years of my life? And for this 2 or 3 years, what do I need to protect myself in order to sprint at this pace? And knowing that is there a light at the end of this tunnel, and what can that light at the end of this tunnel look like? Another piece is when we're on the hamster wheel and going, we often can feel like if I don't take that one shift, like it's make or break for me. And for a lot of us, that actually may be the case, but in some cases it's, can I say no to that one shift every 2 weeks? Can I build in this pocket of rest in a 3-week cycle? What can that look like? For my dad, when he worked at the mill, it was 2 weeks on, and then he would have like 3 days off. And so those 3 days off, I knew Ma would put up the blackout curtains. He would have like more sleep than usual because it was like recovery from night shift and all of that intensity. So it's cultivating the pockets that can allow you to kind of maintain, because if that 2 months is still gonna be work, but are there like 6 or 7 days within that 2 months that are just yours? And then when those days do come, letting yourself not feel shame or guilt about just like being an absolute piece of nothing. Because it's a lot of work, the things that your body is going through and what you're doing and the like unrelenting nature of life. So it's how can we make those off seasons micro, off days, off periods, and then asking yourself like, what do I need to recharge? Am I turning away from my community because I'm too tired when this is actually like going out tonight with a group of friends might actually like fill my cup a little bit? Is disconnecting from my people actually like making me more burnt out? When I think of my parents, I think of like, there was always laughter. There was always community. Who are the people you can lean on for a little bit more support? Folks that you've maybe met this semester or that are around you in an extended sort of way. So it's not a simple answer. And I also would like offer to you that whatever feels right to you, to trust that, because this is hard. And the season that you're in is a difficult one, but that you're also doing great. So it's not a simple, like I wish I could offer more, but that you're doing great, micro breaks, planning and letting yourself actually take a couple of those shifts off if possible. And then like, what is the baseline I need to function well? And then zooming out and being like, this is 2 years. And at that point, figuring out, can I take a full week off at this point? Can I take like a little bit longer of a break? But I hope that that's helpful. We can continue this conversation after too, so we can keep diving in.
Hi, My
And
name
what was
is
your name? Yeah.
Rory.
Hi, Rory.
You mentioned as part of that answer and a couple times else throughout the talk about friends and family and your community. Like, how do you, while you're taking time for yourself and trying to focus on yourself, how do you keep those relationships where you need them to be, and how do you, like maintain and like your friend group, your community, while all this other stuff is going on?
That's a great question. And statistically, unfortunately, especially for male relationships, as you age into your 20s and 30s, dudes aren't as good at staying connected. So I'm going to offer you some of the playbook that I have in effort that like you connect with the people who matter most to you. And it's about building it into the schedule of what it means to focus on you. So, if it's certain habits or activities, doing them with someone, or having someone on a call with you while you're working on something, just like a little bit of chatter in the background. It's small ways of staying connected to the people and making them a part of your goals. So if there's one or two people, and this doesn't need to be like a broad swath of people, like if you have one or two anchor humans, that's all you need. Growing up, I always wanted to be friends with everyone. And my mom was like, Komal, you can't be friends with everyone. You only need like one or two solid people to feel safe and connected and good. And it's sometimes about the vulnerability of being like, hey, like this is where I'm at right now. I might not call all the time, but when I do, let's get into it. Like, let's dive right in. I have a lot of friends who I can't talk to them every day, but I call them like once every couple of months, and they know like when we finally get on the phone, we're gonna go into it. We're gonna get into it. Another thing, are you a gamer by chance? Yeah. So my husband keeps community through gaming. And it's something that I've been really particular about, like helping him protect, because when he's gaming, he's so happy. And the boys are on, and they're all together, and they're chatting, and they're having a good time. And that's allowed to be how you connect to your community. And then being the guy who's like, hey, what if we talked about something while we're gaming? Like something important to us. And Mitch does that sometimes, and it falls flat, and the guys are like, no. But sometimes it like works out, and everybody's like, actually, like this is where I'm at right now. So it's, where is your community meeting, and how can you be the instigator of some more deep conversation? And then letting yourself be okay with how you connect with your people. I know that there's like a lot of perceptions and shame around gaming, but I think it's actually such a strong psychosocial tool. During the pandemic, I lived with my husband and then our cousin. They were happy, they were connected, they were pumped, they knew what their social schedule was every night. They were like, you should start gaming, you will have more friends, and you will be, and I'm like, dude, no. But we can play Monopoly Deal, that's my game night on Friday with them. But yeah, so it would be making them a part of your goals, leveraging the community that you do have access to when you are doing activities that matter to you, and then making it a routine. So like once a week, having it even in your calendar or on your to-do list to be like, I'm gonna call someone and talk, because we have to build the habit of staying connected. So that's something that I would suggest. Yeah.
Hello, this is Eddie.
Hi, Eddie.
I'm also an international student and an immigrant. So it's always been struggling during each semester, during each courses there. I'm wondering, what really post-graduation prepare us for the future, for our career? What do you think?
Of how to prepare for...
No, what the post-graduation prepared us for the future, for our future career?
So post-graduation, how to prepare for your career, and what you can do now for that.
I mean, what really prepared us for our future?
What will really prepare you for your future? What are you studying?
I'm computer programming, yeah.
So A+ field choice.
Yeah, sure.
Even
really
with all the
hard,
tech layoffs that are happening right now, it's still a great skill set to have. There's, again, like the innovation that's gonna come out of this recession is gonna be really high. Networking is one of the biggest things. The tech community in Ottawa is huge and really inclusive. In some, not really, but like inclusive in that the barrier to entry to get to know people is low. So what I would suggest to best prepare for a career in computer programming in Ottawa is to attend like networking events with the Canada Board of Trade, Ottawa Board of Trade, the Canada Business Association. and start to get to know people who work at these companies. And to network in a way where you're building relationships, not just looking for outcomes. So one of the best ways that's worked for me in my career is to build friendships versus transactional relationships. So when you're meeting someone at a networking event, sharing your story, like you shared with me about being an immigrant, about being in computer programming, telling them what your goals and dreams are. There are a lot of folks who actually would love to mentor and support folks who are going to be recent grads. So just being upfront with that and saying, like, I'm trying to figure out what's next. I'm building my network and community, and I would love to get to know more about you and also to share more of my story. And if anything comes up, to just keep me in mind for it. And then that LinkedIn connect, because especially professionally in the tech space, a lot of this networking happens on LinkedIn. So the other thing would be mindset, to like persevere. There's some people who won't reply. There's some people who aren't going to be kind in interactions. That's happened to me a lot. But to just persevere and know that your mission is to have a great life in Canada, in your new home that is treacherously cold. But that being your mission means that regardless, you're gonna knock on 100 doors, and it's the one that answers and the 10 that are warm with you that are gonna be your next step forward. So to just keep persevering would be the advice. Thank you for asking. Do we have time for a few more questions? Yeah, perfect.
Hi, my name's Cameron.
Hey, Cameron.
You mentioned very briefly that you thought about like going into politics in the next 5 years, and right now your brand seems to be, you do your podcast, you do your speaking series like you're doing now, and you've got this this brand of like inspiration. How would you like convert that into doing politics, whether it's federally or locally?
Yeah. Thanks. Great question. So one of the through lines, so I have been engaged politically for a long time. So while it's like the brand of inspiration, well-being, all of these things, I've kept a rootedness into civic engagement and action. And then also my consulting is specifically with women-led startups and businesses in the tech and tech space specifically. So I've always kept a little bit of like a grounding in reality. Because when you're an inspirational speaker or a motivational speaker, you can be easy to write you off to be like, this person, they're just here to pump our tires. But I also know that a huge part of this, and y'all feel this just in our conversation today, is mindset, is how we approach life, is practical ways for us to approach things. But my background is actually in social innovation, political science. So it's really just bringing out another part of me. So it's how do I, over the next 3 to 5 years, start engaging in more civic dialogue, start coming back to the roots of the things that I'm most passionate about, advancing local priorities for communities, advocating in different ways. So it is a marketing shift in terms of the business, but it's something that I've constantly been engaged with. For example, I was in Philly this last week canvassing for John Fetterman for the midterm elections. So I think people are going to come for you regardless of what you do when you run for public office. And so part of the reason I'm taking my time too is because I have to be mindful of my own security, because especially in political places these days, like things aren't always safe. But the biggest thing for me would be, and I'm working with advisors on this, is like a strategic plan for public facing, what matters most to folks and what matters most to me, and how do we create sort of the brand around that, and then also really rooting it into concrete policy related issues, changes, and the shifts that we're seeing as Canadians or as Ottawans. So it's a long-term strategy, and that's why I'm taking my time with it, because through this journey I might realize, actually, this isn't for me, but I want to continue to support folks through advocacy and civic engagement. But yeah, that's some of the thoughts there. Thanks for asking, Cameron. And I'm also open to thoughts, because part of jumping into politics is getting folks' thoughts and about that as well. So I might follow up with you.
Sorry, just kind of on that thought, what kind of political space were you thinking of entering, if you had an idea yet?
I have an idea. I'm not sharing just yet, but in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll possibly know if I end up following it. Back to Adil.
Hi, different question this time.
Perfect.
You spoke a little bit about deriving meaning and purpose from work and how our current society tends to peer pressure us into believing that your work should be the most meaningful, purposeful thing in your life. But you said it's also quite fine if you do a 9 to 5 and draw and derive meaning outside of it. How would you define that? You know, like how does one draw meaning and purpose outside work, but at the same time not get so demotivated and disinterested in work? You know, like at what point do you draw that line that what I'm doing outside is just as meaningful? I don't hate what I'm doing 9 to 5, but the stuff I'm doing outside is probably what gives me more meaning and purpose.
So when you look at the roots of resilience, you've got community, well-being, self-efficacy, so that belief in yourself. Relationship to work is one that like we parse into of like decoupling productivity from self-worth, and that's where you get to kind of be like, wow, life, being a human, what is this like? And when you're going through that exercise, honestly, the biggest one that helps you build purpose outside of work is your community. So like people often say this, the person you choose as your life partner is one of the most important decisions of your life. This is the person who provides a lot of purpose for you, who supports you if you want to explore growing a family. But this can also be like a group of friends who are your like life humans if you're someone who isn't looking to be with another person long term. And so really building a foundation of support around, like, for example, back home, Mom and Papa started the Gurdwara back home, which is the Sikh temple in Grand Prairie. And to this day, those friends that they made in the 70s are their, like, ride or dies. To, like, their Lochin uncle and all these people that always come to our house on a daily, like, weekly basis. And so, but what we as a society have done now is we have disconnected from each other, and our devices have become our pseudo-community, which is a great way to connect to people, but we still need that in-person connection, because if you're working 9 to 5, working from home, turn off your computer, and then you just turn on another screen, which is your TV, and that's your life, or like the makeup of you, that is a fragile life. So we have to build back in physical community, in-person engagement, hobbies. We're allowed to have those. We're allowed to have hobbies. I love playing volleyball. I haven't played volleyball in 2 years. I'm excited to get back on a team so that I have another routine outside of work. Some people love art or, yes, gaming in person, fighting, MMA stuff, like that sort of, you know, what are the habits and routines and hobbies that you can build outside of your life? And then travel is it for a lot of people too. So I know a lot of folks who are 9 to 5, do what they gotta do, get the salary, do the things, and then they save up all year and they go on their big trip. So it's what makes up life for you outside of work? And this might be some of the first times that some of y'all are exploring this. And because you've been in school for so long, you're gonna have a lot of space open up in your life too, because when you get into those jobs like you've shared, like, how do you not just resent it because it's like A, boring, or B, just like soul-sucking? Sometimes you gotta do the soul-sucking job to get to the thing that matters more to you as well, or that feels better. The other thing about work is prioritize the quality of your team and the people you're actually working with on a daily basis, sometimes over the shiniest of roles. This might be more important to some people than others because you're spending more time with your colleagues than you are family members or other people. So you have to actually enjoy the people that you're working with. My husband had the opportunity to go to another team, but the manager was known for being very, very abusive to his team. And so while it would have been a promotion, he decided to stay where he is and now has had another opportunity come up for promotion. So if we say no to toxicity, that also protects our well-being in the workplace, which isn't always an option for everyone, but like if that's part of the equation, then that's helpful too. But I hope that that was helpful.
That is unfortunately all the time we have for questions, so I have to cut this off. But thank you so much for this amazing talk. It was a pleasure having you join us for Third Thursday. Thank you everyone who joined in person. The event was also recorded, so you can watch it again or share it with others. It'll be available online in the coming days. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you, everyone.